Julian Hayes straightened his bow tie for the third time in as many minutes, staring at his reflection in the gleaming elevator doors. The annual Broadcasting Excellence Awards waited 30 floors above him, a glittering spectacle where careers were made or demolished over cocktails and carefully choreographed small talk. His reflection stared back, all sharp jawline and practiced confidence, but his hands betrayed him with their slight tremor. "You look like you're about to face a firing squad," said the woman beside him, her voice carrying a hint of amusement. Julian glanced over, taking in Cassidy Morgan for the first time since they'd met in the lobby 10 minutes earlier. She wore an emerald dress that somehow managed to be both elegant and effortless. Her auburn hair swept into a style that looked casual but probably took an hour to perfect. She was beautiful, certainly, but it was the intelligence in her eyes that caught him off guard. This wasn't just some actress playing a role for the evening. "Is it that obvious?" Julian asked, managing a self-deprecating smile. "Only to someone who's been to 100 of these things." Cassidy adjusted the clasp on her clutch. "For what it's worth, the whole desperately trying not to look desperate thing is very on brand for these events. You'll fit right in," the elevator chimed, and the doors slid open to reveal a sprawling ballroom transformed into a garden of excess. Crystal chandeliers caught the light from 1,000 angles. Men in tuxedos and women in designer gowns clustered around high-top tables, their laughter pitched just loud enough to sound genuine. A string quartet played something classical and forgettable in the corner. Julian took a breath and offered his arm. Cassidy took it with the practiced ease of someone who'd done this before, which made sense considering he'd hired her specifically for that reason. 3 weeks ago. After his producer Brenda had not so subtly mentioned that Preston Vale would be attending with some European model. Julian had made a decision that felt clever at the time, and increasingly foolish in retrospect. He'd contacted an agency that specialized in professional companions for corporate events. No romance, just appearances. Cassidy had come highly recommended. "Remember?" Cassidy murmured as they entered the ballroom. "You're a confident man who doesn't need to prove anything to anyone. We've been dating for 3 months. We met at a charity auction for children's literacy. I bid on a weekend in the Hamptons. You bid on the same package just to outbid me. We tied, decided to share the weekend, and here we are." "You're good at this," Julian observed. "I'm excellent at this," Cassidy corrected. "That's why you're paying me." They hadn't made it 15 feet into the room before Preston Vale materialized, a champagne flute in each hand and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Preston hosted the competing morning show on a rival network, and their professional rivalry had become where Julian prided himself on substance and journalism. Preston built his brand on celebrity gossip and manufactured controversy. The ratings were uncomfortably close. "Julian, so glad you could make it." Preston's gaze slid to Cassidy with practiced assessment. "And who is this vision?" "Cassidy Morgan," she said, extending her hand with perfect poise. "I've heard so much about you." "It's all terrible, I hope," Preston said, though his smile tightened. Julian does love to complain about the state of modern broadcasting. As if anyone wants hard news at 7 in the morning, Julian felt Cassidy's hand tighten almost imperceptibly on his arm. A warning, or maybe support. "Some of us believe viewers deserve more than recycled tabloid stories," he said evenly. "And some of us give viewers what they actually want." Preston took a sip of champagne. "But please, don't let me interrupt your evening. I'm sure you two have much better things to do than talk shop." As Preston glided away toward a cluster of network executives, Cassidy leaned in close. "He's worse in person than you described. I may have undersold it." Julian grabbed 2 champagne flutes from a passing waiter, handing one to Cassidy. "Thank you, by the way. For the save back there, that wasn't a save. That was basic social blocking." Cassidy's eyes tracked the room with professional interest. "The real test comes when people start asking questions, which will happen in about 3, 2, 1. Brenda Hartwell appeared as if summoned, her silver dress shimmering under the lights. She'd been producing Julian's show for 5 years, and he'd learned to read every micro-expression on her weathered face. Right now, she looked skeptical. "Julian, darling, introduce me to your friend." The way Brenda emphasized friend suggested she knew exactly what was happening. Brenda, this is Cassidy Morgan. Cassidy, Brenda Hartwell, my producer, and the person who actually makes me look good every morning. Interesting, Brenda said, shaking Cassidy's hand while maintaining eye contact with Julian. And how did you two meet? Cassidy launched into the charity auction story with perfect detail, adding small touches that made it feel lived in rather than rehearsed. She described the auctioneer's nervous laugh, the way Julian had stood up so quickly he'd knocked over a water glass, the smell of gardenias from the centerpieces. By the time she finished, even Julian almost believed it had happened. Oh, Brenda said slowly. That's quite the story. Julian, could I borrow you for just a moment? Network people want to say hello. I'll be fine, Cassidy assured him. I see the dessert table calling my name. Julian followed Brenda to a quieter corner of the ballroom, already bracing for the lecture. Have you lost your mind? Brenda hissed the moment they were out of earshot. You hired an escort? She's not an escort. She's a professional event companion. There's a difference. There's really not. Brenda rubbed her temples. Julian, I know Preston gets under your skin, but this is beneath you. What happens when people find out? They won't find out. It's one night, Brenda. Tomorrow, I go back to being the serious journalist who's too boring to date anyone interesting. Preston gets his moment of thinking I have a life. Everyone wins. Except you, Brenda said quietly. Because you're a terrible liar, and you actually deserve someone real. Before Julian could respond, a commotion near the bar drew their attention. Preston Vale's voice carried across the ballroom, louder than appropriate and sharp with anger. I don't care if you're with someone. I'm asking you a simple question. Julian moved on instinct, weaving through the crowd until he could see what was happening. Preston had cornered Cassidy near the bar, his body language aggressive, despite the smile still plastered on his face. Cassidy's expression remained neutral, but her posture had shifted into something defensive. The lady said she wasn't interested in your question, Julian said. Inserting himself between them, Preston's smile turned ugly. Playing hero for your hired date? That's rich, Hayes. Did you really think nobody would recognize her? She's been to half these events with different men. The nearby conversations died. Heads turned. Phones discreetly angled for photos. You know what your problem is, Preston? Cassidy's voice cut through the sudden silence. You think everyone operates the way you do? Yes, I attend events professionally. I help people who are too busy building actual careers to play your social games. There's no shame in that, despite what your tiny mind might think. She turned to Julian, her expression softer. I'm sorry. I should go before this becomes more of a scene. Don't, Julian heard himself say. The word surprised him as much as anyone. Stay, please. Something shifted in Cassidy's expression. Surprise, maybe, or recognition. Why? Because Preston's right about one thing. I did hire you to make an impression tonight. But standing here now, I realize I'm tired of performing for people I don't respect. Julian looked around at the watching crowd, at Preston's smug face, at Brenda's concerned expression. I spent 3 weeks planning tonight like it was a military operation. I agonized over which tie would make me look successful, but approachable. I hired someone to pretend to care about me because I was too proud to admit I'm lonely and too scared to risk rejection. Julian, Cassidy said softly. You don't have to do this. Yeah, I do. He turned back to Preston. I'm not here to compete with you anymore. You win. You have better ratings, better hair, and apparently the moral high ground tonight. Congratulations. Preston's smile faltered. Winning without a fight clearly wasn't as satisfying. Julian looked at Cassidy again. I know tonight was supposed to be business, and I'll still pay you what we agreed on. But would you maybe want to get out of here? Go somewhere that serves actual food instead of these tiny artistic insults to cuisine. Cassidy studied his face for a long moment. Then she smiled, and it was nothing like the professional polish she'd worn all evening. It was real and slightly crooked and completely unexpected. I know a place, she said. Fair warning, though. It's a dive bar in Brooklyn with terrible lighting and excellent nachos. Not very glamorous. It's perfect, Julian said. They walked out of the ballroom together, leaving the whispers and camera phones behind. In the elevator, Riding down from that glittering world of performance and pretense, Julian felt something unknot in his chest. He'd come to impress everyone, and had ended up impressing no one. Somehow, that felt like the best decision he'd made in years. The dive bar Cassidy led him to was called the Rusty Anchor. Wedged between a laundromat and a bodega in a neighborhood Julian had never visited despite living in New York for 8 years. The neon sign flickered with stubborn persistence. And through the smudged windows, he could see mismatched furniture and walls covered in vintage concert posters. "Second thoughts?" Cassidy asked, pausing at the door. "Not even first thoughts," Julian said, surprising himself with the truth. Inside, the bar smelled like beer and fried food, and something indefinably comfortable. A jukebox in the corner played old rock songs, and the handful of patrons looked up with mild interest before returning to their conversations. No one recognized him. No one cared. It was possibly the most relaxing moment Julian had experienced in months. They claimed a booth in the back, the vinyl seats patched with duct tape. A waitress with purple hair and multiple piercings took their order without writing anything down, then disappeared toward the kitchen. "So," Cassidy said, shrugging out of her coat, "that was quite the exit. I'm fairly certain I just torpedoed my career." Julian loosened his bow tie, letting it hang undone around his neck. "Brenda's probably drafting my resignation letter as we speak, or writing the press release about how her host is a genuine human being, instead of a corporate robot." Cassidy folded her hands on the table. "For what it's worth, what you did back there took courage, or stupidity. I'm not sure there's a difference anymore." Julian studied her across the table. Without the ballroom's dramatic lighting, he could see the freckles across her nose, the laugh lines around her eyes. "Can I ask you something?" That's generally how conversations work. "How did you end up doing this? The professional companion thing?" Cassidy was quiet for a moment, her fingers tracing patterns on the table. "I was an actress. Not a good one, but enthusiastic. Did the whole struggling artist thing for 5 years. Waited tables, went to auditions, got rejected, repeat. Then my mom got sick. Stage 4 cancer. The medical bills were crushing her, and my dad had died when I was 12, so there was no one else." "I'm sorry," Julian said quietly. "One of my roommates worked for the agency. She suggested I try it. The money was good, really good, and I didn't have to compromise anything important. I wasn't selling myself. I was just being a +1, making small talk, helping people not feel alone at events they dreaded." Cassidy met his eyes. "My mom died anyway, 2 years ago. But I'd paid for her to be comfortable at the end in a nice facility with good nurses. That mattered." The waitress returned with 2 beers and a plate of nachos that could have fed a small army. Julian waited until she left before speaking again. "Community theater sometimes? I did Blanche Dubois last spring in a warehouse in Queens. 15 people showed up opening night, but it was the most alive I'd felt in years." Cassidy pulled a tortilla chip free from the cheesy mass. "What about you? Did you always want to be this serious morning news guy?" "I wanted to be Walter Cronkite," Julian admitted. "Even as a kid, I'd watch old broadcasts and imagine being the person who helped people make sense of the world. My dad was a factory worker in Ohio. High school education. But every evening he'd watch the news like it was sacred. He'd say, 'Jules, this is how you stay informed. This is how you be a good citizen.' Let me guess. He wouldn't approve of morning show fluff? He died before I got the job. Heart attack at 53. Julian took a long drink of beer. Sometimes I wonder what he'd think. I started out wanting to do investigative journalism, real stories that mattered. Now I interview celebrities about their skincare routines and read cheerful banter off a teleprompter. But you're good at it, Cassidy said. I've watched your show. You have this way of making even the silly segments feel genuine. Like you actually care about the celebrity chef teaching you to make the perfect omelet. The secret is that I do care. Not about the omelet, but about giving people a reason to smile at 7 in the morning. Is that enough, though? Is that what I studied journalism for? They talked for hours, the nachos slowly disappearing as the bar filled and emptied around them. Julian learned that Cassidy spoke 3 languages. that she'd spent a semester in Prague, that she volunteered at an animal shelter every Sunday. Cassidy learned that Julian played piano badly but enthusiastically, that he'd once spent 2 weeks following a story about municipal corruption that never aired, because it was too complex for morning television, that he secretly hated champagne but drank it at events because it seemed expected at some point. Julian's phone started buzzing with increasing urgency. He ignored it until Cassidy pointed at his pocket. "You should probably check that. The world might be ending." 17 missed calls from Brenda. 43 text messages. Julian scrolled through them with growing disbelief. "What is it?" Cassidy asked, reading his expression. "I'm trending," Julian said slowly. "Someone filmed my little speech. It's everywhere." He turned the phone so Cassidy could see. The video had been shared thousands of times, with comments ranging from supportive to mocking to surprisingly thoughtful. Several entertainment news sites had already posted articles. Morning Host's Meltdown competed with Julian Hayes' Gets Real. For headline supremacy, Brenda's most recent text read, "Call me immediately. This is either the best thing or the worst thing that's ever happened to your career." Julian dialed. Brenda answered before the first ring finished. "Where are you?" She demanded. "Brooklyn, a bar." "Listen, Brenda, I know I screwed up." "Screwed up?" "Julian, the network president, called me. At 11 at night. Do you know what that means? I'm fired. You're viral. The good kind. People are calling you authentic, relatable, human, Preston. Vale's team is in damage control because he looks like a bully in every version of the video." Brenda's voice softened. "You did something real tonight, Julian. Something that connected with people. The network wants you in tomorrow morning to discuss how we can capitalize on this." "Capitalize," Julian repeated flatly. "I know how that sounds. But think about it. You wanted to do meaningful work. This could be your chance to reshape the show, to do the kind of journalism you actually care about." They're listening for the first time in years. After he hung up, Julian sat staring at his phone. Cassidy waited patiently, sipping her beer. "They want to turn my existential crisis into a marketing. That's what I do. But it doesn't mean you can't use it for something good." Cassidy leaned forward. "You said you're tired of performing, so stop. Be the person who tells the truth at 7 in the morning. See what happens? Is that what you do?" "Tell the truth." "Not usually. My job is to be whatever the client needs me to be. Charming, smart, engaged, but ultimately forgettable." Cassidy's smile turned sad. "Tonight was different, though. Tonight, I gotta just be myself. It was nice." Julian reached across the table, his hand covering hers. "What if we did this again? Not as a business arrangement. Just as two people who apparently enjoy talking to each other in dive bars, Julian?" Cassidy didn't pull her hand away, but something shifted in her expression. "You're riding an emotional high right now. Tomorrow, you're going to wake up and remember that you're a television personality with a career to think about. I'm the woman you hired to impress people. That's not a great foundation. Then we build a different foundation. Starting now. No scripts, no performance, just two people figuring it out. You don't even know me. Not really. You know the version I showed you tonight, which might be real or might be another role I'm playing. So let me know you. The real you. However long that takes." Julian squeezed her hand gently. "I spent tonight trying to impress people I don't respect. I'd rather spend tomorrow getting to know someone I actually like." Cassidy was quiet for a long time, her thumb absently tracing circles on the back of his hand. "Okay," she said finally, "but we do this slowly. No grand gestures, no declarations. We get coffee, we talk. We see if this thing is real or just the adrenaline of a weird night." "Coffee," Julian agreed. "I can do coffee." They left the Rusty Anchor sometime after midnight, walking through Brooklyn's streets that smelled like rain and possibility. Julian's career might be imploding or transforming. He couldn't tell which. But standing on a corner, waiting for Cassidy's cab, watching her smile in the glow of a streetlight, he felt something he hadn't experienced in years. Hope. The cab pulled up. Cassidy paused before getting in. standing on her toes to kiss his cheek. Thank you for tonight. For being honest, even when it was scary. Thank you for the nachos and the company. The nachos were pretty excellent, Cassidy agreed. Then she was gone, the cab disappearing into the city's late-night traffic. Julian's phone buzzed again. Another text from Brenda. Whatever you're doing, keep doing it. The overnight social media numbers are insane. You're officially interesting now. Julian smiled and started walking toward the subway, his bow tie stuffed in his pocket and his expensive shoes clicking against the pavement. He'd come to the awards ceremony hoping to prove himself to everyone else. Instead, he'd found someone who made him want to prove himself to himself. That felt like progress. The coffee shop Cassidy chose for their first real date was aggressively normal. No artisanal beans roasted by bearded craftsmen. No Edison bulbs or reclaimed wood. Just a franchise location, 3 blocks from her apartment. With industrial carpet and laminated menus and a teenager behind the counter who looked profoundly bored. This is perfect, Julian said. Meaning it, you were expecting somewhere Instagram-worthy. Cassidy stirred sugar into her coffee. She wore jeans and a sweater, her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. Without the evening gown and dramatic makeup, she looked younger, more vulnerable. Was expecting you to pick somewhere you actually like. Mission accomplished. 3 weeks had passed since the awards ceremony. 3 weeks of texts and phone calls and carefully orchestrated meetings that felt nothing like dates. While somehow being exactly that, Julian's career had indeed transformed. The network, sensing an opportunity, had greenlit a new segment called Real Talk with Julian Hayes, where he spent 5 minutes each morning discussing substantive issues. Without the usual morning show sugar dash coating, the ratings were climbing. Preston Vale's show was bleeding viewers. Brenda walked around the studio with a permanent smile, but it was the evenings Julian treasured. The nights when he and Cassidy would meet after her events, still wearing whatever costume her job required, and they'd walk until she felt like herself again. He learned that she talked to herself when she was nervous, that she cried during animal rescue videos, that she had strong opinions about Oxford commas and weak coffee. I need to tell you something, Cassidy said now, her fingers tight around her cup. I got a call yesterday. A theater company in Chicago wants me to audition for their season. Real acting, not community theater. Paid positions. Julian felt something twist in his chest. That's amazing. Cassidy, that's what you've always wanted. It's also 1,000 miles away. It's finally met his eyes. We've been doing this thing for 3 weeks. This careful dance where we're both pretending we're not falling for each other because it's too complicated and too fast, and I'm still technically the woman you paid to be your date. And now I have to decide if I'm going to chase a dream or stay for something that might not even be real. It's real, Julian said quietly. At least it is for me. How do you know? Maybe I'm just another performance. The cool girl who likes dive bars and deep conversations. Maybe I crafted this whole personality because that's what I do. I become what people need. Is that what you think you're doing? Cassidy's eyes filled with tears. I don't know anymore. I've spent so long being other people that sometimes I forget who I actually am. What if you fell for a character and not the real person? Julian reached across the table, taking both her hands in his. The first night we met, you told me exactly who you were. You were honest about your job, your past, your reasons. You didn't have to be. You could have kept up the illusion. But you chose truth, even when it was uncomfortable. That's the person I'm falling for. Not some performance. Falling for, Cassidy repeated. Present tense. Very present tense. She laughed, wiping at her eyes with her free hand. This is such a disaster. I'm supposed to keep professional distance. I have rules about this. Oh, so break them. Come to Chicago. Do the audition. See if it's everything you hoped. I'll be here when you get back. And if you decide to take the job, if that's what makes you happy, we'll figure it out. Long distance, weekends, whatever it takes. You say that now? But you have a career that's finally taking off. I've seen what this business does to relationships. The hours, the pressure, the constant scrutiny. Then we'll be different. Julian squeezed her hands. Look, I spent years performing a version of myself that I thought people wanted to see. Professional, polished, always in control. It was exhausting and empty. These past few weeks with you, I've felt more like myself than I have in years. I'm not giving that up because it's complicated. Cassidy's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, her expression tightening. It's the agency. I have an event tonight. Some tech launch party. Do you want to go? No, but I need the money, and I signed a contract. She stood, gathering her bag. I should get ready. Julian walked her to her apartment building, an older brownstone with flower boxes in the windows. On the steps, she turned to face him. Can I tell you something terrible? She asked. Always. Part of me hopes I don't get the Chicago job, because being with you is easier than chasing a dream I've been failing at for years. And that makes me a coward. It makes you human. We all want things to be easy sometimes. Julian brushed a strand of hair from her face. But you're not a coward, Cassidy. You're one of the bravest people I know. You'll go to Chicago, you'll be brilliant, and whatever happens after that, we'll handle it. She kissed him then, soft and sweet and tinged with sadness. I'll call you after the event, I'll answer. Julian walked back to his own apartment, his mind churning. He had an early morning ahead, a script to review, a meeting with network executives about expanding his segment. The life he'd built was finally becoming the life he'd wanted. But without Cassidy, it all felt hollow. His phone rang. Brenda, please tell me you're not at home watching cat videos, she said without preamble. I'm walking. What's wrong? Preston Vale just announced he's leaving his show. Taking a job in Los Angeles, some primetime news magazine thing. The network wants to know if you'd be interested in taking over his time slot. Better guests, bigger budget, real journalism. What? Julian stopped walking. This was everything he'd worked toward. The kind of platform where he could do actual investigative work, tell stories that mattered. His father would have been proud. I need some time to think about it. He heard himself say time. Julian, this is the opportunity of a lifetime. What's there to think about? Whether it's worth losing something else important? Brenda was quiet for a moment. The girl. The one from the awards ceremony. Her name is Cassidy. And yes, Julian, I say this with love. Don't be an idiot. If she's real, if this thing between you is real, she'll understand that this is your dream. And if she doesn't, then maybe it's not as real as you think. After they hung up, Julian sat on a bench in a small park, watching the evening foot traffic stream past. Everyone looked purposeful, like they knew exactly where they were going and why. He envied them their certainty. His phone buzzed with a text from Cassidy. Event is awful. Pretending to care about cryptocurrency. Save me. He smiled and typed back, address? 20 minutes later, he walked into a sleek gallery space in Tribeca. All white walls and minimalist sculpture and people drinking organic wine while discussing blockchain technology. Cassidy stood near the back, nodding politely while a man in an expensive suit monologued about digital disruption. Julian walked straight to her, ignoring the curious looks. Excuse me, he said to the suit. I need to borrow her for a moment. Before anyone could protest, he took Cassidy's hand and led her outside into the cool evening air. What are you doing? She asked, but she was smiling. Something impulsive and possibly stupid. Julian took a breath. The network offered me Preston's show. Primetime, real budget, everything I've worked for. Julian, that's incredible. You have to take it. That's what everyone keeps saying. But here's the thing. I spent years chasing a version of success that was supposed to make me happy. And it didn't. What makes me happy is sitting in dive bars with you, talking about everything and nothing. What makes me happy is knowing you're a phone call away when I have a terrible day. What makes me happy is this. Right now. Standing outside a party neither of us wants to be at. Cassidy's eyes were bright with unshed tears. You can't turn down your dream for me. I won't let you do that. I'm not. I'm choosing my actual dream instead of the one I thought I was supposed to have. But I need to know something first. When you go to Chicago, when you do that audition, are you coming back? I don't know, Cassidy whispered. I honestly don't know. What if I get the job? What if I finally get to do the thing I've always wanted? Then I'll visit every weekend. I'll learn everything there is to know about Chicago deep dish pizza. I'll become a theater person who understands what blocking means. Whatever it takes, why? The tears were falling now. Why would you do that? Because 3 weeks ago, I hired you to help me impress people I don't care about. And instead, you helped me remember who I actually am. Because you make me laugh and challenge me and see through all my carefully constructed walls. Because I'm falling in love with you, Cassidy Morgan. And I don't care if it's too fast or too complicated or completely insane. Right there on the Tribeca sidewalk, with cryptocurrency enthusiasts streaming past and the city humming around them. When they finally pulled apart, she was laughing and crying at the same time. I'm falling in love with you too, she said. And you're right, it's completely insane. So what do we do about it? I go to Chicago next week. I do the audition. I give myself that chance. And you take the network job because you've earned it and you'll be brilliant. And then we figure out the rest as we go. No plan. No script? No plan, Cassidy agreed. Just two people who met under ridiculous circumstances and somehow found something real? Julian's phone buzzed. A text from Brenda. Well, do I tell them yes? He looked at Cassidy, at the woman who'd started as a business transaction and become something infinitely more valuable. Yes, he texted back. Tell them yes. 4 months later, Julian sat in his new office reviewing scripts for his evening news magazine. The show was doing well, better than anyone had predicted. He'd just finished a piece on pharmaceutical pricing that had actually moved the needle on public policy. His father would have been proud. His computer chimed with an incoming video call. He answered immediately. Cassidy appeared on screen, her face bright with exhaustion and joy. Guess who just finished her first week as an In the Diary of Anne Frank? How was it? Terrifying. Exhilarating. I forgot a line during the Thursday show and had to improvise for 30 seconds. I thought I was going to die. Ow. Her smile was radiant. It was the best 30 seconds of my life. I'll be there Friday, Julian said. Front row, flowers, the whole thing. You don't have to keep flying out every weekend. I know how exhausted you must be. Not tired, he lied. He was exhausted. The new show was demanding in ways his morning program never had been. The travel was brutal. He'd lost weight he couldn't afford to lose. But every Friday evening, when he boarded that flight to Chicago, when he saw Cassidy waiting at arrivals with that smile that was just for him, every bit of exhaustion evaporated, Liar Cassidy said fondly. But I love you for it. I love you too. After they hung up, Julian returned to his scripts. His phone buzzed with a message from Brenda. Interview with the mayor confirmed for tomorrow. Also, your ratings are up again. Just thought you should know. Julian smiled and got back to work. He'd started this journey trying to impress the world, trying to prove he was worth paying attention to. He'd hired someone to help him perform a version of success. Instead, he'd found the real thing. Not in the ratings or the accolades or the career milestones, though those were satisfying in their own way, but in the moments between, in the phone calls and weekend visits, in the dive bars and cheap coffee shops and all the unglamorous spaces where two people could just be themselves. He'd looked for a date to impress the world, but he'd ended up falling for the woman he'd never forget, and that, Julian thought, was the best story he'd never planned to tell.